Hello and welcome to Overtime Hockey Talk. I am Mark Paul, and joining me, as always, my beautifully dressed co-host, always with the
Oh,
collar. My collar is generally non-existent.
yeah. This is
So,
one of the beauty things about doing it right after work. Right? Got to
true.
look nice. Got to look sharp.
Yeah, that's
Office
true.
job.
I'm sporting my Atomic Souls shirt
Ooh.
here. Well, it's too low. Hold on. I'm going to stand up. There we go. Atomic Souls. A friend of mine got me the shirt because he does stuff for them, and they're like a mental health
Oh, awesome.
company. They're cool. They're like, all right, we don't want you abusing substances, but you can smoke weed. It's a different kind of mental health company. So, anyways, Atomic
Clearly.
Souls, they're cool. Yeah. So we have a lot to talk about because, like we were talking about off air, this week is madness. Like Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals, and then I think it's today, Wednesday, that is the Board of Governors meeting, and then tomorrow is the award show in Vegas, and then Friday the draft begins, and then Saturday is rounds 2 through 7, and then we have 2 more days, and then in comes free agency, all boiled down into one. Monday's free agency.
Yeah. Don't forget. I think today is the opening window for the buyouts.
Yes, that too.
Yep.
Yeah, we have not seen a buyout yet. However, I have to imagine that something's coming. But
Well, there is one rumor out there. We can get into that later. But
all right, sounds
yeah.
good. Before we jump into all the rumors and all the things going on, I think that it behooves us to take a look back, take a step back. This Stanley Cup final that I said would be the best final since 2011, when the Vancouver Canucks lost to the Boston Bruins in 7 games. And after 3 games, it looked like I was going to be really wrong. And now, 17 weeks later, now that the final is over, I think I was right.
Yeah. You were
Find me a
right.
better final in the last 15 years?
Probably not. I won't disagree with you. I think maybe you could throw maybe Boston, Chicago in there. I don't know. But I will say I was right about picking Florida in 7. So
Yes, you were. Yes, you were. And it's funny because I said Oilers in 7. So you would have thought that by the time that game came around, when people were asking me who I thought would win, that I'd be like, I said Oilers in 7, so I got to keep picking them. And I changed my pick.
that you did.
I was like, I just cannot see Florida losing 4 times in a row. That is a ridiculous amount of times to lose for a team in the Stanley Cup Finals. There's a reason why it doesn't happen. Yes, it happened in 1942, but that was during World War II. The NHL's a tad bit different. Players are making a wee bit more money. Or should I say players are making money? Because for all intents and purposes, they really weren't.
They
Because
had
they went
summer
and they
jobs.
worked like construction in the summer. Or they just went, they were like, oh, my season's over. I might as well head over to Europe and fight some Nazis for a minute and I'll come back for the season. It was a very different time. So I think it's fair to say, you're looking at it and you're like, it would have been amazing if it had happened, but it is almost impossible to beat if it's not the best or the second best team in the league, definitely absolutely top 5 if a conference is awesome. Hard to beat a top 5 team in the NHL 4 times in a row. Like, coaches are too good, players are too driven. Anyways, it was a tough ask, but an amazing finish to the final. What were your thoughts on Game 7?
Oh my gosh, dude. I had no investment in either team. Obviously I picked Florida, had to pick somebody, but I wasn't invested. I wasn't like, oh man, Florida's got to win or else I'm going to be wrong. Mark's going to shit on me for weeks and weeks. No,
And you didn't bet the farm on Florida going.
didn't bet a single dollar. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, no investment, but man, I was on the edge of my seat that entire game. And the one thing that I was keeping my fingers crossed praying for was, I said, you know what? I just want to see Bobrovsky back to form, maybe Stuart Skinner. We get a good goaltending battle. Even if it's a high scoring game, I don't care. As long as the goalies are still making some good freaking stops and not looking like freaking can't stop a beach ball type goaltenders.
Yeah.
Which we got. And it was back and forth action. Florida got back to their game. I was just, again, on the edge of my seat. And I could see why. Since 2013, this was the highest viewed Stanley Cup final game in history.
And the fact that it's 2 teams that are, I know the Oilers are Canadian, They're a Canadian team. So, yeah, you get a lot of Canada watching because there's a little more interest. But let's be honest, like out of all the Canadian teams, the Oilers, if the Oilers are probably the second smallest market outside of Ottawa, I think is the smallest market out of the Canadian teams. So it's not as if it's like Montreal or Toronto in the finals, and it's not like the Rangers or the Blackhawks, the Bruins, or even some like the Flyers or the Penguins. We're talking the Florida Panthers. These were two very, from a grand scheme of things, small market teams, and people were watching. People were tweeting that. I think it was, oh gosh, Dan Orlovsky was tweeting about the game. NFL, former Lion, NFL commentator. And there was like, I heard Reggie Wayne. Remember Reggie Wayne? He was tweeting about the game. He was like, I don't know the rules, but this is amazing. But yeah, it was cool. There was a lot of hype, and especially in Florida, the American audience that doesn't usually maybe get this kind of hype. That game absolutely got it. And one thing I just wanted to note, end of that game, last like 3 minutes, when you're like, okay, McDavid's probably got one, maybe two more shifts here. And it was like he played the whole time. Him and Draisaitl were just skating. I've never seen an NHL player with that much talent look so bad for a couple minutes.
They were gassed, man.
They could not do it. And it was the biggest fault of the whole series, I think, was leaving them in, not letting them rest for 30 seconds. And it just, that to me was it. And Paul Maurice, that like in 3 minutes, it was, there it is. Paul Maurice, he was the better coach. And those 3 minutes, I'm not saying they would have scored, but I'm pretty sure fresh legs would have done something in the final couple minutes, because they couldn't do anything. They couldn't even get into the zone. They looked pitiful.
No. Yeah, I mean, so let's just face it, right? Florida was all over them that whole entire Game 7. Anytime they touched the puck, they got back to the way they played in Games 1 through 3, basically, which is a big factor as to why they came away with the victory. For me, though, I watched that game, and the one thing I noticed was, and this was pretty much the same in Games 4, 5, and 6, whenever they had trouble scoring goals. They basically would move Draisaitl up and have him play on a line with McDavid. But obviously that has a trickle-down effect, and let's just face it, they're not as deep as some other teams. And we've talked about this in length. Dallas series, this series, the lack of depth up front at the forward position. But the one thing I never saw him do, and maybe this kind of is part of the reason why he wasn't giving them rest in those last 3 minutes, it's the lack of experience there from a coaching perspective. I never once saw him try to shuffle up the lines to put somebody on Draisaitl's line, like move Nugent Hopkins down, move Zach Hyman down to play with Draisaitl.
Or like Matthias Janmark, or get Adam Henrique up with him or something. Henrique was buzzing.
Right.
Janmark was amazing. Yeah, that guy probably made himself an extra $500,000 to $700,000. No joke. Like,
oh, for real?
Those playoffs just made him a ton of money. Maybe in the millions.
Yep, that penalty kill and that depth scoring, people are going to pay for it now. And so for me, just watching Draisaitl, I'm like, okay, great. We obviously, injuries aside, we don't know what's wrong with him, and obviously now we know he's got some injuries. But they never once tried to shuffle it up. It was always like, let's put Draisaitl with McDavid. And it's no. That's the biggest problem I think Edmonton has for next season, is the lack of wingers to play with Draisaitl when scoring gets tight. You need that.
And by the way, Draisaitl did say today that he absolutely loves playing for the Oilers, and he wants to play for the Oilers. So I know that it's nothing is done, nothing's set in stone. It could just be a little bit of hey, I really want to play here as long as you're willing to pay me $15 million. I don't know what that looks like, but it certainly seems like he wants to stay in Edmonton. I think this playoff run had to have shown him, and the Oilers have some of the best fans in the game, bar none. Like, those fans were all about this team. I think the city was going crazy. From what I understand, there was just Oilers flags littering the entire city, the entire playoffs, but especially the finals. And yeah, I think it's fantastic. The one person who was maybe the happiest that Edmonton didn't win was Evander Kane's ex-wife. I don't know if you saw all the tweets that she had. It was like pictures of Connor McDavid crying, and she was just like, this is what you get for supporting pieces of shit. Her whole feed was just like, I saw like screenshots of all the stories that were just pictures of Oilers players sad and Florida players super happy. And I think the very last one was a picture of Matthew Tkachuk that said, "I'm still open to it if you are," or something like my new favorite player in the NHL is this guy because he beat Evander Kane. Oh my goodness.
I got to look that up.
Yes. I think I saw it there's an Instagram account called Puck Empire.
Okay.
And it's a little bit it's got some good, actually some good stuff, but there's some gossipy hockey things that are really funny. But that one's, imagine your whole life and your whole persona being all about hating a person. And that's her. So it's funny and also sad, but also very funny. Anyways, those last few minutes, I think in the end, we find out McDavid probably needs abdominal surgery. Draisaitl had a couple broken ribs. Like, it reminded me of Patrice Bergeron in the 2011 Stanley Cup Finals, when it was like, oh, Bergeron had to have his heart removed and put back together, and they put it back in for Game 7. Yeah, it was a long,
dude,
so
crazy.
You understand why maybe McDavid really struggled in Game 6 and 7, and I understand. But at the same time, you go, well, but you do have other players who have been playing really well. Like, Nugent Hopkins was so good. He was amazing in these playoffs. And I don't know why other players weren't put out in the end. And I understand, hey, we're going to go down with our big guys. But what's the point if your big guys are walking, like, they didn't have any legs? It was like the guy in Monty Python, it's merely a flesh wound. And he's down there on his on his torso. That's what it looked like. They just couldn't even get the puck in the Florida Panthers zone, let alone set up and get some chances. So they were just completely gassed. And I also think, hey, that's what you get when you're down 3-0. They gave all they had in those other 3 games just to get there. And you don't have any time to breathe. And that's the result.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, though. I think looking at the Florida side of things, right? We talked about Janmark making a couple extra bucks. Dude, the end of that game, they were still rolling out. Florida was their 4th line. Obviously, Okposo's going to retire, but Kevin Stenlund and the Lamborghini, man, I think they probably made themselves an extra 500, 750 out of this run.
Florida. I mean, and we will dive into every team individually as we head into the offseason here. Florida's got a lot of work to do. Like, for a team that just won the Stanley Cup and has been to the finals 2 years in a row, they've got a lot of work to do. Now, their big guns, though, they're all still there for at least one more year. Ekblad's got another year, and I don't think Ekblad, it was very interesting. I don't know if you watched the post-game presser with Paul Maurice, the next day, where he was talking about different things on the team, and they asked him about Aaron Ekblad, and he said, look, like, Ekblad was this guy who was putting up big points, and I basically came in here and said, you aren't going to be that guy anymore, and you need to be the stay-at-home defenseman. You're not going to put up points anymore, and it's not going to help you make more money. Essentially, he was fine with it. He already made all his money. He's good. And I still think he's going to go into his next contract. He's probably going to make a pretty similar number to what he's making right now at 7.5, but you're going to have to make that decision. Is Aaron Ekblad worth $7 million anymore? If he's not putting up 50 points, if he's only putting up 20 or 30, is he worth $7.5 million? Like a Pietrangelo a little bit. He reminds me a lot of Pietrangelo, does he not?
Yeah, that's a fair comparison.
There was a time when Pietrangelo was putting up pretty big points, and then all of a sudden he was just this like rock solid defenseman who really maybe needed an offensive partner to keep him going, which he has in Vegas, and Ekblad obviously has in Gustav Forsling. And I do wonder, is Forsling as good without Ekblad in the long run?
That's the question. But the nice thing is they're both the same age. Forsling signed to a long-term deal, so I think getting that quote-unquote discount I think you're probably
tax thing helps too.
Yeah, I think you're probably going to see a similar number, and they're going to try to keep them both as that top pair moving forward for the next 5-6 years. And why not, right? It worked out really well. And I like the thought process, too. And I think Detroit did something similar last year with Shane Gostisbehere. But having OEL, an offensive-minded guy on that third pairing where you don't have to worry about him playing top-line minutes, and then power play struggles, boom, you throw him out and try to remedy that because you have an offensive-minded guy on defense.
Yeah, and lots of experience, obviously, with Ekman Larsson. Any thoughts about when they handed the Stanley Cup out Order of the Cup was Barkov hands off to Bobrovsky, and then Bobrovsky hands off to Okposo.
Yeah.
And then Okposo to Kulikov. And then Kulikov, I think Aaron Ekblad got it after that. Anything you would have rather have seen there?
No, I'm not. You know what? I'm not really a big, I wonder who's going to pass through next or who's going to be last.
Dare they?
I think the only thing is, okay, who's first, right? And I think that kind of goes back to when I was graduating high school. The first pass off was Joe Sakic to Raymond Bourque.
Yep.
Made perfect sense, right?
Yep. And Sakic didn't even raise the cup, right?
No, he didn't.
Handed it right over.
Yeah, just gave it right to him. So for me, it's like that, right? You want to give it to a veteran guy who's been there for a long time. And I think both Bobrovsky and Okposo were those guys. And so,
well, Okposo hadn't been in Florida for a long time, but he has suffered for a very long time.
He's been on some bad Islanders, some bad Sabre teams. And
by the way, do you know all the players on this team that played for the Buffalo Sabres?
Oh my gosh, I read and not only that, but like for other Stanley Cup recent winners as well.
Yeah,
crazy.
Jack Eichel. You've got Brandon Montour on this team. You got Kyle Okposo, Sam Reinhart, and then Jack Eichel the year before. Yeah, there's so many Buffalo Sabres.
Ryan O'Reilly.
Yep, Ryan O'Reilly. And
what's even better is I read somewhere it was, I can't remember what year it was, but the Buffalo Sabres interviewed Bill Zito for their assistant GM job and turned him away. Said, "We don't want you." And whoops.
Oops. And now Bill Zito is just the Buffalo Sabres are the farm team for the rest of the NHL. Go to Buffalo, season yourself up, get some action, and then go somewhere else and win the cup. That's how you do it. All right, we'll get into more about the Panthers as the offseason goes along. Should we talk? Any final thoughts on the finals? Anything you want to say there before we move on to what's happening now?
No, I loved it. It was everything I hoped for, minus the overtime winner. But I don't think I could have taken the tension. So
I would have loved to see OT in that series. Oh, that would have been so much fun. Yeah, would have been so fun. Okay, let's go to, before we get to the Detroit Jacob Walman trade, I do want to talk about probably the biggest trade made this week was Linus Ullmark going to the Ottawa Senators from the Boston Bruins. What'd you think of this deal?
I actually was surprised that Ottawa didn't have to give up a little bit more, considering that they had to take back Korpisalo in the deal. Because everything I read coming up to this was essentially like Ottawa wants to get rid of him. So it was publicly known. It wasn't like a secret. So his numbers were terrible. I mean, one of the worst seasons, he's clearly ever had, but of any goaltender in the NHL last year. And I don't care what kind of system you have, those numbers are pretty bad to look at and hard to swallow, even if you think you bring him in and maybe we can retool him. We have a goalie guru coach, might work with him a little bit. But I guess at this point, that's where the market is. And not only that, too, but I think a lot of people just forget that Ullmark had that no trade clause. So he was in charge of where he wanted to go. So I think that being considered and the fact that Korpisalo is only going to cost you $3 million, it's actually not that bad.
Yeah, if you can get Korpisalo back to some type of form.
Yeah, 905, 907 save percentage.
He's only 30 years old. You got to think that you can find at least another season or two in him. Now, this is what I heard. Was that, okay, so Korpisalo has a 16-team no trade, I believe it is.
Okay.
And what I heard was that, he has a 10-team no trade list. Now he has to submit that trade list every season after July 1st. So this last year's, which it encompasses right now while being traded, he saw that Ottawa had just acquired Jonas Korpisalo. So he did not put Ottawa on his list because he didn't think he'd get dealt there because they already had a goalie.
Oh, boy.
I don't think he actually wanted to go to Ottawa. And what's out there is that he would have had Ottawa on his list if he had known. But he thought, you're making the play, you're making the bet that Ottawa just traded for a goalie. They're not going to do it again. And
just like you probably wouldn't put the Rangers on there because they've got...
Even if you don't want to go to New York, you're not getting traded to New York.
Right.
Or you probably look at it and go, I don't need to put Toronto on the list because the Bruins are probably not trading me to Toronto.
Right.
Good chance of that.
Right. Yeah. And I saw a thing today too, which is even crazier and backs up a little bit of what you're saying, that he doesn't want to go there because there was a report about an extension. Somebody was asking, I don't know if they were asking him directly or just his agent. I don't recall which one it was, but essentially he said that he's going to get settled in with his family, view the city, see how things go, and then talk about an extension later. So it sounds like almost like I don't know if I want to stay here. So let's see how the season goes and figure it out.
Yeah, it's almost like an Alex DeBrincat scenario, right? Where you're saying, hey, maybe we can convince this guy to stay. Now, Alex DeBrincat didn't work out. They ended up getting a pretty good haul back for him anyways.
Mm-hmm.
Goaltending is a far different position. And frankly, the Senators, yeah, you give up a first-round pick and Mark Kastelik, but I think in the long run, you're going, they rid themselves of $3 million in Korpisalo for the next 4 seasons. So what you paid was almost like, hey, you paid a first round pick just to get rid of Korpisalo. That's probably what you would have had to pay if you wanted to get rid of him.
Yeah, sure.
You're talking for maybe a second round pick. So you upgrade that to a first and you get to bring in Linus Ullmark, even if it's for a year, if you think he can help you and he gets you over the hump. And then you can go, look, like, we were really good. We just needed you to be here and we'll pay you. We want you to be one of the core guys here. Maybe that's something that would appeal.
Yeah, could be. And look, he's 30 years old, so I think he's looking at this like, my next extension is going to be my last big paycheck.
That's
right?
probably what you get, 4 years, maybe a 4 year.
Yeah, and he hasn't been starting in the NHL since he was 2021, so he's still got a lot of mileage left on him. And again, his last few years in Boston have been split with Swayman. But the thing that sucks about this for him potentially is if he goes to Ottawa and they still have the same shitty defense, because we know Chikrin's on the block right now, and he shits the bed, right? Now, does he cost himself a couple $1 million AAV? Or maybe some term at that point, and he has to take a 1 year contract for $4 or $5 million and try to figure it out somewhere else. Like,
it's true. I could see spinning it like, look how good I was when I was actually on a good team, a team that played defense, and now I get traded to a team that doesn't. And yeah, I'm not going to sign here because of that. Again, you go somewhere where they do have a good defense and they're looking for that last piece. Which, how many teams would be willing to do that? I'm sure in a season from now, you look at the Maple Leafs who just signed Joseph Woll to a 3-year extension. You look at that and you go, who are you going to have as a backup? Maybe Linus Ullmark in a year. If it doesn't work out, maybe he's somebody that you look to bring in and you go, hey, he's the final piece, and you figure the rest out. You've got more cap space. A team like Carolina, I got to imagine, unless they can go out and make some crazy trade for a goalie that we don't know about yet, Carolina's probably walking in the next season with some big question marks in goal, to say the least. Peter Kochetkov is going to be there, maybe a Spencer Martin, but you've got 1 more year of Frederik Andersen, and I could see that being a dicey situation. You probably don't trust Andersen anymore. Like, Andersen's in the same boat that he's in now, that he was in with the Leafs when he left the Leafs. Like, it was like, this guy's good though, but once it gets to a certain point, he's not. He can't handle the pressure,
and he's going to get hurt every year.
And he's going to get hurt. Yeah. So I guess you hang on to him, you let him be your 1B, and you figure out the rest. What else? You don't really have any other choice right now, because now Ullmark's been dealt and Markstrom's been dealt. Who else is out there that we know of that is on the block that you could easily go grab?
Apparently Tristan Jarry's on the block now.
Tristan Jarry, yeah, but then is that not the same guy? Is Tristan Jarry just a younger version of Andersen?
Like, he really is, yeah. You're right.
He's good, absolutely. But he's going to get hurt, and he's never. This isn't his fault. He's just never really had much of the opportunity to go deep in the playoffs because his team really hadn't been very good. He's made the playoffs. He's only really been the starter for the Penguins in the playoffs once, and that was 2020-2021 was that year. So it's hard to pin it on him in there. Then he played 1 playoff game the year after that. I'm not sure that we can say that he wouldn't be decent in the playoffs, but I think we can all say that he's going to get hurt. Like, it's just a matter of time. He's going to get hurt. So yes, Tristan Jarry, that name's out there. Yeah, but there's really not any other goalie that you go, oh, yes, we could still trade for this guy and it'll all work out. Like, I don't see where that guy's coming from. Maybe like a Jordan Binnington, if you're willing to take on that big salary. He's still got another, including this upcoming year, 3 years left at $6 million, and he's got maybe a 18 team no trade list for this next season. So you also have to be able to make the cut on that one. And outside of that, I don't think the Predators, maybe a UC Saros, if they can't get him signed, he's probably the next guy to become available. If he's not willing to sign, they have to trade him.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And I think Nashville's going to look they want defense right now. They just got rid of Ryan McDonough. I think if you're a team, unless you have, and Mitch Marner, a big trade chip to play, I don't think they're going to move him unless they just get an offer too good to pass up. They'll even roll into the playoffs if they're in it with him after the deadline. So,
they have proven that before.
Mm-hmm.
Philip Forsberg. So, yeah, I think I know a lot of people are talking about Pesce and Shea going somewhere together and being a defensive pair because they do play really well together. Would Nashville not be a perfect scenario for both those guys?
Oh, I've heard Pesce's name around Nashville just circulating everywhere. That one's a hot commodity. I think it probably will happen.
They've got $26 million in cap space. They could sign them both, give them both. I mean, and they can do whatever you want to do, a long-term deal. They could do something like Dan Orlov got, or Dmitry Orlov got, where it was that short-term, a little bit more money. Depends on what these guys are looking for. But, yeah, it doesn't look like both of them can return to Carolina, and I wonder if either one of them do. So let's talk Walman, traded from the Detroit Red Wings to the San Jose Sharks. Break this one down for me. How do you feel about it?
I feel angry. I don't know look, he's been a fan favorite in Detroit. Everybody loves to see him out there. Yes, he's probably not the best defenseman, right? He's not suited for top line minutes because he's been Seider's partner for the last couple seasons. And he's 2 years ago looked fine, but last year had some issues. We saw him a couple times, got moved off that top pairing. And I think he's better suited on a second pairing role. He can chip in every once in a while with a nice goal, but he plays some solid defense if you don't have to put him against the top opposition forwards. But for me, though, this is a guy who's cost controlled for the next few years. He's under a great contract for what he gives you. And he's, again, a guy who can play in your middle pairing there. But if you have to, you can move him up to your top pairing and he'll fill in well enough for short stints.
For San Jose, he's going to be on their top.
He is.
I really think he is.
And so, look, you would think for a guy who's young, cost controlled, and is capable of playing top line minutes, you think teams would pay for that. But instead, the Red Wings essentially had to pay San Jose a second rounder to take his contract on. And I get it, right? Detroit wants to dump some salary. They're trying to make some big moves. And apparently now there's a big rumor going around with Anaheim and John Gibson and a big splash coming. And who knows, maybe it might involve
there's our other goalie. How could we forget about Johnny Gibson? He's only been on the block for the last 93 years.
But what irritates me, we'll get into him in a second, but what irritates me most about the Walman thing was I saw this report on Sportsnet where essentially this insider had reached out to a bunch of other GMs and they're like, we never got a call. We would have absolutely taken him or even less for a guy like Walman. So I don't know what Yzerman was thinking. If he was just like, you know what, I'm going to call the first guy that says yes to it and give him away. I don't know what the plan is because future considerations, and I look at San Jose, right? What future considerations do you want from them that are worth anything, right? They don't have any veteran guys that you want to take on. They don't have any future prospects they're going to be willing to part with that you're excited about. So I don't get it. It makes no sense. So I'm more or less just constantly clicking the refresh button, waiting for that next big move that Steve Yzerman's supposed to be doing right now. I heard, Tristan Jarry's name thrown out there too. And I thought, okay, maybe we could have a 3-way trade where Gibson goes home to Pittsburgh where he's from. Because I know Pittsburgh's interested in getting rid of Jarry with some retained salary and all that crap. And then maybe Jarry comes to Detroit and Husso goes back to Anaheim because obviously Detroit would have to get rid of Husso's contract at that point. But who knows, man?
It seems strange. It seems strange. We'll see what that future consideration ends up being, I suppose. I guess there's been times where somebody considered the future and they gave something up later on. I was trying to remember when it was. I believe it was in the 70s or like early 80s where somebody was traded I think it was like I'll have to find it, but the Minnesota North Stars or something. And they were traded for future considerations. And 3 or 4 months later, they gave back that player and said he was the future consideration that they gave back. And they undid it. So somebody was traded for themselves, essentially, which is pretty funny.
Yeah. And so that second round pick, too, that Detroit gave up, they had previously traded with Nashville, essentially gave them a defensive prospect who actually could be a pretty good defenseman, struggles a little bit on the defensive side. Nashville lacks a lot of defensive prospects at this point.
Which is weird to say.
It felt like they've been a defensive factory for years. But Detroit has they have an abundance of quality defensive prospects. Don't think he's someone that would make the roster anytime soon or jump the rest of the people on the pecking order, but it's just baffling. I just look at what Yzerman did last year, signing Justin Hall, giving him a modified no trade clause, and so he may get bought outright to essentially save a couple $1,000,000 over the next 2 years. Ben Sherratt, that was questionable at the time too, and Jeff Petrie, I'm okay with it. I'm not super upset about it, but there's been some questionable moves on the defensive side, and I get it. You got to save some money to get Lucas Raymond and Mo Sider re-signed, but they had plenty of cap space. So I got to see what this next move is because right now it's just frustration as far as that move's concerned.
Yeah, it's like the whole table hasn't been set yet, and all you can see are the little butter knives, and you're like, what's happening? I want my steak knife. You're waiting around for it. Yeah, it seems like a strange move, though, just in general. Like the fact that I think you could have there had to have been someone out there who would have gone, hey, I would take Walman to help me get to the cap floor, give me a decent defenseman, and not have to give up a second-round pick.
Yeah, a fourth-round pick, a third-round pick. I mean,
right. Or just trade him for a fifth-round pick. Really, nobody, put him on waivers, perhaps?
Seems could have done that. Someone would have picked him up, I'm sure.
I feel like they would have. I really don't understand. I'd love to get some more insight from Yzerman. He did speak, but didn't give any info about that, unfortunately. Who knows? What does Mike Greer have on Steve Yzerman?
Yeah. Now, I will say in Yzerman's press conference, he did address the goaltending thing and said, I'm not bringing in a guy that's going to be around for a year or two. I want a guy who's going to be around for a while. And I look at John Gibson and Tristan Jarry, and I'm like, they've got long-term deals, right? They've got a few more years signed. So
yeah,
it could make sense.
They do. The hard part about John Gibson, I know he really has 3 years left on his deal. $6.4 million. He's 30 years old. Yeah, he could be there for 3 years, but you also don't know what you're going to get.
That you don't.
A guy that has John Gibson is a great name, a phenomenal name. But let's take a look at the last 5 seasons where his best years are a .904 save percentage. That was 5 years ago and 3 years ago. He's dipped below 900 the last 2 years, and I know he's on a bad team, but he has not been able to sustain much. He's just, I think, starting to age. He's on the wrong side of 30 now. I don't know that he's going to get worlds better.
No, but I wonder if it's a mental thing, right? I mean, when you're playing in bad teams for so long, at some point, maybe you're just mentally have given up and you need a change of scenery.
Yep, that's true. That's true. And I don't know looking at what Boston got for Ullmark, which I think it's fair to say that they didn't get much. They took back another goalie to square up a little bit on the financial side, and they get a first-round pick, which the Bruins' first round, it's 25th overall or something like that.
Yeah.
So it's not a super high first-round pick. I mean, it's still something. It's not that it's nothing, but I look at John Gibson and I go, Ullmark won the Vezina Trophy 2 years ago. He was still great this last year.
Mm-hmm.
He's far better than John Gibson has been. And John Gibson, really the last time he had a good season was 2018-19. That was 6 years ago that he had a good season. That's a long time ago. He was 24 years old.
So I have to imagine if there's a big move coming and Gibson's coming back as part of that package, I have to imagine you have to ask for Zegras, right? You have to include him. And maybe Detroit's got a lot of good forward prospects, so maybe they send one back,
Yeah.
right, to help compensate and make it equal. But to take on Gibson's contract, I want a guy like Zegras. I can't see swapping Gibson and Husso, even one for one. That just wouldn't work for me.
Oh, so you think that Husso would go?
He would have to. I mean, he would have to get
have
moved. You can't go in next year with Gibson, Husso,
Which,
and Lyon. So.
yeah, which would give Nashville or Anaheim would have 1 year left of Husso. He could still, if he can stay healthy, he could still give you something.
Right.
But yeah, you'd need to. If you get Zegras, you're definitely giving up a first round pick, which their first round pick this year is what, 15th? Actually, I think.
Yeah, it's 15th.
Yeah, it's 15th. Yeah.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember which pick it was that Detroit traded for DeBrincat, but it was Ottawa's or Boston's.
Yeah, they gave up Boston's. But I'll tell you what, I mean, again, Detroit's got a couple of really good center prospects in Nate Danielson and Marco Kasper, and I know Detroit's very high on Danielson, so Kasper going the other way would be a very good add for a team like Anaheim because he's projected to be a really good middle six center. So again, if you've got McTavish, Leo Carlson, and Marco Kasper down the middle, that's the makings of a pretty good young team right there.
I do wonder if the whole Zegras maybe being traded is kind of smoke, like maybe just to light a fire under him.
Yeah,
hey,
maybe.
Man, we actually have to consider trading you. Like you were considered a corner piece of what we were doing, and now we're thinking about dealing you. Like you got to figure your stuff out because you're supposed to be this guy, like, and you weren't last year.
Or maybe he just says, F you, you guys want to trade me? I don't want to be here anyways. I've got 2 more years at 5.75. I'll take my money and
but that's fine. He could, but what if he goes 2 more years? And I know he was hurt. He only played 31 games. But if he goes a couple more years and he's only putting up 40 points, he's got a point every other game. He's not getting a big contract next time around. You signed the deal. I just wonder if he actually is going to get traded or if it's more like maybe teams are hoping he gets traded because teams want to buy him low. So they're putting out this, hey, we're super interested in him and we would love to have him on our team. So therefore, hey, they're shopping him because we talked to them about him. But maybe Anaheim, the ask for him is probably still pretty high.
Yeah. Let's not forget, too, Verbeek used to work for Yzerman here in Detroit. They're buddies. They used to play together, too. So maybe there might be something there.
Yeah, maybe they'll get Trevor Zegras for future considerations. Yzerman will do to him. He's like,
hey, those future considerations we got from San Jose? Here you go.
Coming at you. Or Mike Greer is going to fight you. Actually, I wouldn't want to fight Pat Verbeek. He's a scary dude.
Yeah. Real quick, I got to ask you, did you see the new Ducks jerseys?
Yes, I did. Yes.
Yay or nay?
The Orange County jerseys.
Mm-hmm.
Pure orange. I'll give them this. There are no other teams in the NHL with that color, and I really like that. I feel like Utah's new jerseys, and I know it's only for the year, I just feel like they're the Seattle Kraken. Like, they're the same colors.
Almost.
Really? We can't, you got to be blue?
I thought they were going to go purple. I thought they were going to go purple, man, for whatever reason. I mean,
yeah,
it makes sense.
Stick with the Utah Jazz kind of vibe and stick with your purple. And they probably will. They probably are like, we got to keep next year's jersey really different. Like, you wouldn't want to have them be close because then you wouldn't get as many people buying them.
Yeah, here's the thing, right? If you change the color scheme too much, how awkward would that be if you have a bunch of fans in the stand opening night and they're all wearing the blue jerseys and you're really purple?
That is a good point. Yep. Maybe they won't change the color very much. No. I don't know. I didn't love those, but the orange, I like the logo a lot.
Yes.
The logo is really cool. I personally was hoping that they were going to go with the 1995 third jersey where the cartoon duck is smashing through a wall. That's one of the coolest jerseys ever.
Yeah, I miss that old color scheme. Purple and teal or whatever.
Yes, but the orange, I can get on board only because no one else has that color, and they are in Orange County. I'm in. Yeah. Cool. It's very Orange County. It's very flashy, and I'd like to see how it's going to look on TV. That's really what I'm curious about. Okay. Yeah, the jersey's pretty in your face on a Twitter post, but what's it going to look like on TV? up against that ice.
That's a good point.
So we'll see once we actually get to see it in person. And then also LA. What do you think of LA's new?
Yeah, I like it.
Their new vibe.
Yeah, I'm digging it.
Yeah, I think that's the better of the two. Theirs is just, it's classic. It's much more classy.
Classy. That's a good word for it.
I like the colors of that. I like the way that it's a little bit shiny on the logo. The font's cool. I like the whole thing.
Just don't bring back those chrome helmets. I did not care for those too much.
Those are bad. What?
One game, I'm cool with it, but
right, yeah, maybe for hockey fights brain cancer or something, and there's or like hockey's conspiracy theory night, and everybody's wearing a tinfoil hat.
Dude, okay, I'm digging that.
Before we get out of here, we wanted to talk a little bit about what we're going to do for the draft. We know there's a whole bunch of things happening. There's lots of live things all throughout the draft, and our listeners are huge fans. They'll be watching. We are going to, as quickly as possible, be pumping out when big trades happen. We'll be putting it out onto our socials. So look for us, OT Hockey Talk. You can find us on Instagram and TikTok and YouTube. So we'll have all the links below. You can click them in the description. Whichever place you like to go, they'll all be on there, and you can follow along. We'll give our thoughts on what's happening during the draft. Justin will be doing his. We're not going to be together, unfortunately, so we'll just be doing them separately. But my wife's birthday's on Friday, and
shame.
Gotta. I think if I was getting paid, it would be a lot easier to be like, sorry, honey. But this is our thing. But we will pump those out as quickly as we can. When big news breaks, which we will not be doing anything for Celebrini goes number one, because we've known he's going number one for about, since like last year. Especially when the Sharks won the draft lottery, we knew he was going to go. Anything for the actual entry draft? Any big thing that you expect to happen at the draft that you're looking for?
Yeah, teams moving up and down, right? Last year, not a single trade in the first round. So that's what I'm looking for. I'm hearing rumors, right? So the Rangers want to move up. I think, I don't even remember what number. I think it's 30. They're 30th right now. They want to move up. And so
Gacko.
Yeah, I've heard they want to get out of it. So
tick it up.
Let's go. Let's go, baby. I want to see moves. I want to see teams moving up and down the draft. I want to see teams go get the guy they want. I remember, we were talking about Red Wing goaltenders when Sebastian Cossa was there, right? The Red Wings moved to get him. And before that, Jesper Wallstaff from Minnesota, they moved to go get him as well. So I want to see teams move. I know there's probably no goalies, obviously, in this draft they're going to go after, but I want to see teams move to go get guys that they want to try to make a deal. Or even better yet, trade for a big name player and deal your first round pick as part of that.
Love it. Here is why I think moves will actually happen. Because you have only 7-8 teams with less than $10 million in cap space available. So we've got 24 teams with 10 million or more cap space. That includes the Oilers and the Avalanche, the Rangers, the Canucks, the Bruins, the Panthers, the Leafs. Like, we've got some high money, high ticket teams. Utah only has $42 million in cap space. Anaheim 33, Chicago 32, same with Detroit, San Jose 29, Nashville 26, Carolina 23. Like, we've got some teams with a lot of space. Oh, and also Utah has $7.8 million on LTIR as well. So they technically have $50.4 million available to them. They could sign everybody.
They could sign everybody.
I know they won't, but lots and lots of cap space there. So there's a lot more to go around because cap's going up by over $5 million, and that's 5 times 32. You get another $600 million thrown in there, and that's a lot of money to throw around. And it'll make July 1st really interesting, but it'll make for a lot of flexibility at the draft. And I think you're right. This year should make up for last year.
Yeah, and I think, too, for the lack of guys up like at the top end of free agency. I mean, we've got Gensel, Stamkos, Reinhart, but some of these guys may end up staying where they are. So there's not going to be a lot of high-end talent available for free agency. So I think that's why you're probably going to also see a lot of moves to teams that need to make big improvements, need to have drastic changes. They're going to use those first rounders and those high picks to try to shake things up a little bit.
Yep. And anytime the Toronto Maple Leafs are rumored to be moving somebody, that's gonna fill things up. Somebody was super mad at us, by the way. I wonder if they responded. They were very angry at us for suggesting that if Marner was traded during the finals, that would have been the focus. We joked about that. Oh, Florida wins the cup. Oh, Mitch Marner got traded, so have a nice parade. Let's talk about Marner. And they were so mad. And the best thing is that I think 5 days later, they responded, blah, blah, blah. This is stupid. Nobody cares about Marner. And 5 days later, this morning or yesterday morning, they responded again and said, just wanted to come back and say this, that you guys were wrong. This game ended up being one of the most watched games, you loser. And I was like, we never said that people weren't going to watch the game.
Right.
Of course people are going to watch the game. It was just that they would talk about the Marner trade more.
Yeah, and
I just thought it was so funny. This guy.
I'll back this up right now. I saw a video today of basically, I can't remember who it was, but somebody walking out in the streets with the Stanley Cup in Miami and just people driving by, not paying any attention to it. Nobody seemed to care at all in Florida. And so that's what I'm like, dude, if you come up here in Toronto or Detroit and you're walking around with Stanley Cups, you will get mauled by fans like crazy.
Yep. People will.
So,
yep. Absolutely.
Believe me, Marner news would take the cake.
Sorry. It is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that Florida. It's not that Florida doesn't have fans. It's not that Florida fans is any Canadian team. I mean, you've got the Marlins. You've got or whatever. They're the Marlins still.
Marlins, yeah.
Yeah, Marlins. You've got the D-backs. You've got the
Miami Heat,
Dolphins. You've got college football. And you've got college basketball. There's so many sports that are such high level. And in Edmonton, there's like the Rough Riders in the CFL. That's it. Toronto at least has the Raptors and the Blue Jays. But every other city, they don't have any like pro North American team. Maybe like some soccer or lacrosse or something. But yeah, nothing like. There's no NFL team. There's no NBA team. There's other than the Raptors. There's no MLB team other than the Blue Jays. There's just less to compete with.
Yep, and unless Drake is talking about the Raptors, nobody cares about them. So let's go.
Toronto people love their Raptors.
They do. That they do.
All right, there's our show. We will look forward to chatting with you and interacting with you as the draft goes on. Drop comments and let us know what you think of what's happening, and we will be with you all the way through. Justin, see you during the draft.